All right. So I'm going to get started with this. This is a new program that we're trying out. Um, we've got the preparation event for getting ready for Internship Connect, and we figured it would be helpful to follow up the event with some tips on like the process afterwards. Because, whenever you're preparing for something like an event, you're thinking, okay, the event is like the main thing that you're doing, but what's interesting about Internship Connect and things like this that we put on at the Career Center is that there is a ton of value and activity that actually happens as a result of the event. And if you're not kind of led through it, those opportunities can slip by. So that's the reason for this gathering. So for our agenda for today, we'll be reviewing kind of what happened with Internship Connect, what the employers are thinking. And I think it's really important to understand, like when you're trying to engage with them, to get into their mindset and know what they're going through and what they're doing. Considering what your networking toolbox looks like, the various resources that are available to you, how to be following up meetings, and especially following up when you don't get meetings. And that is a part of this event as well. And then having time for questions at the end. So with respect to Internship Connect, what happened at the event? So we had like 53 companies that had registered and offered up around 850 time slots that were available. And we were really psyched that the lottery system actually filled up 95% of those time slots. So any time slots that were left over were because there weren't students trying to get onto that schedule. So we utilized as much as we could. And then with respect to the student lottery, there were 386 students that submitted over 3,000 applications. And what that means is that on the average, students got 2 meetings, some less, some more. And so if you consider like, what did the lottery produce? Well, it's like 3/4 of the applications that were made did not result in a meeting. So it was like 1/4 of those applications went into using the available scheduled time slots. Simple observation here, there were many more applications than there were available time slots. Now, I'd, I'd also like to frame this for a minute, because on the one hand, you might be thinking like, okay, only 25% of the applications got scheduled time slots. But from the employer perspective, this is why the employers participate in an event like this. If they were participating to be a part of Internship Connect for 4 hours, and at the end of the night, they had 18 meetings with students that they didn't even select, that would be valuable. But what's super valuable is that for a lot of these employers, they're getting 3 times that amount of students following up the event that didn't get to meet with them. So today, just so you're all aware, we sent packets to all of the companies so that they could have info, resumes, optional portfolio samples on all of the students that didn't make it onto their schedule. So that's a huge value for these companies to have access to not just the students they met with, but all of the numerous students that applied to meet with them for networking and recruitment in the future. 40% of the participating employers were alums. From a networking standpoint, again, like we're using this lens of connecting and networking, your alums are going to be extra welcoming to you. They're the folks that have this camaraderie with you and this common shared experience. And then out of all of the companies that participated, 73% of these companies have hired RISD interns in the past. So again, this is a great group of folks to be networking with, knowing that they've bought into and believe in RISD. These are good folks for you to be reaching out to and connecting with, after the event. And we did question all of the registrants, and almost 80% of the companies that registered said right up front that they are hiring this year, either jobs or interns. So that's also great to know. Now, let's go through the various tools that are available to you right now. So we've got that Internship Connect website, and that's the same URL down across the bottom. And if you add 2025, or if you go to participating companies and look at the 2025 list, you'll see that there is a new link at the top of that page that we can see in pink. And so let's go check that out for a second. So each of you has access to this protected list that is in Google Drive. This list has the company names on the left and the names of the folks with their titles on columns B, C, and D. And then column E actually tells you if there's a yes there, that means that they've provided their email address in Artworks. So this is a great way to account for absolutely everyone that was involved in the event last night. Whether you met with these folks or not, you know who showed up there. So this is a great tool for your networking toolbox, so to speak. We even show resources like this to alums because alumni will also have access to this. If you're looking for company leads that are considered, friendly to RISD, or that are actively engaging with RISD or hiring RISD folks, this is a great list to be using. So it's one of your resources as you're going out and networking. The next resource is Artworks. Now, for many of you, of course, you used Artworks to register for this event. You used Artworks to participate in Internship Connect, but it's also an amazing resource for looking up these companies. So as an example, we know that Hasbro participated in the event last night. And so we can look up Hasbro as a company, one of the companies that was actually like the most popular company among all RISD students at Internship Connect. And you can look up their contact info here. So you've got access to folks that participated in the past and also people that participated last night. So you've got active email addresses available to help you for reaching out to these folks. So this is a major toolkit for you as a RISD student, something that only RISD folks have access to. Another resource that's available to you is using LinkedIn. So I do want to point out one thing in particular, that before getting into LinkedIn and using it for Internship Connect, there is a RISD alumni group, and no, you're not an alum, but yes, you can join this group. And this group has over 11,000 people in it. And so if you go to groups, and it's 3809, you can't search for this. It's something that you have to go to directly. This will allow you to request to join this group. And so everyone in the group that if you do join this group, everyone in that group becomes a second degree connection, or as LinkedIn thinks of it, one step away from you. You have a common connection, which is the networking group or the RISD alumni group. So it's definitely worth participating with that. And so again, using Hasbro as an example, if we go into LinkedIn, and I always like to point out there's a lot of things that are screaming for your attention on this page. And honestly, the thing that is most valuable on LinkedIn is probably like the smallest feature of the site, which is this little search field. So I can search up Hasbro. I can go onto Hasbro's page, and there is a people option under Hasbro. So if I'm looking at the over 7,000 folks that work at Hasbro, I can also go and see where they studied. So I'm looking for your fellow alums. So if I start typing in RISD and I get Rhode Island School of Design, we can see 35 members that you can find that work at Hasbro that, and so if I scroll down now, these are the folks that we're talking about. Some people like Elijah Ferris, who I recognize and who I've advised before, is a freelancer. So Elijah has actually done work as a freelancer for Hasbro. He's being picked up. But then there are also folks that are actively working at Hasbro, like Liz here is a graphic designer at Hasbro. So each of these people presents an opportunity to be networking with them. And you'll notice, of course, that I'm not just focusing on the one representative that showed up from Hasbro last night for Internship Connect. Really, anyone that has some kind of common ground with you from the Hasbro organization would be worth connecting with for future networking activity and possible employment opportunities. So I'm going to use Liz as an example here. If I decide after looking at Liz's profile, seeing all the different roles that Liz has had over the years, I can choose to connect with Liz and I can add a personal note. And so in this note, when we're talking about LinkedIn, this is not like an introductory email. It's deliberately limited, very limited in terms of what you could say. So the key thing that you want to convey in this message is what is your common ground, the best common ground that you have. Now, if Liz was not an alum, I might say something about my interest in Hasbro's work and my skills as a graphic designer because Liz is a graphic designer. In this case, if I'm a RISD alum, I'll probably want to show that I'm also a RISD person and that I'm interested in connecting. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm not asking for a job or being aggressive about wanting a portfolio review. If I'm trying to be as gentle in this process to try to lead to that connection, I want to keep it really simple. So I might say something like, I'm a huge fan of Hasbro, and I'm a fellow RISD student. I'd like to connect. That would be a fine message to send. It is short and it's sweet and it conveys in kind of an informal but professional tone that you have this common ground and you'd like to connect. Then if you get this connection with Liz, LinkedIn will notify you and you can then direct message through the platform. And that's where you might start to get a little bit more specific. You might ask how they like their time at Hasbro, and if they have any inside info about like things that Hasbro looks for in a graphic designer like myself, or an animator or designer like myself. Make sense so far? Now, also, I want to mention that when we're looking at LinkedIn and we're looking at all these different folks, we're seeing that some people, even though they went to RISD, they may not be doing like a total creative or design role. Like, for instance, we see like Mary Davison here, who's a design manager. Well, as a design manager, she likely has a responsibility for recruiting and managing team. Let's say I'm not saying that this would happen, but even if there was someone on here that was like in accounting or something totally random, totally different than what you're doing, because of that common connection that you have with the school, it's always worth connecting and seeing what kind of potential you can gain from a connection and conversations with these folks because they have that willingness to support their fellow alums or students at the school. So You may reach out to someone that is an intern, a freelancer, or even a creative director. Anyone is fair game to be reaching out to. They all have potential value. And then Instagram is also a fantastic other tool to be considering. So you found someone that participated in the event. You may have found some people that are fellow alums or that you have interested in linked on LinkedIn. LinkedIn can produce all of those names, but what if you don't get that connection with them? Well, by all means, you can use that same info about that person to look them up and see if they have a design or creative account on Instagram. And, I won't explain how to use Instagram. I know that it's very intuitive for many of you, but just through the act of following and engaging in people's posts, that can be a great way to get a follow back and possibly even start to direct message folks. And so you could be looking at their active account on Instagram. So Hasbro does do a great job with sharing inside information about their studio that could be helpful for you to be aware of. You could also pick out someone that is currently working there, like this person here is a current employee and alum of the school. And also look at other folks that are on different teams at Hasbro, engaging with them through the platform, learning more about what they're doing. They may have like profile info that leads to their portfolio website or a demo reel that you could check out and really start to learn a lot more about what it takes to be somebody that works at Hasbro to help inform your preparation and your experience at the school. So to address some frequently asked questions from students. So a common thing that we hear in the Career Center is usually this might happen like today, tomorrow, next week. I wrote to the employer, but I never heard back. They put their email address in Artworks to share with us, and I don't get it. Like I did everything I was supposed to do. Why aren't I hearing back? So this is a very common scenario. It's actually something that I have experience with, having been an employer myself, having been somebody that participated in Internship Connect and portfolio reviews in the past. I did come away from these events with that application packet the following day with lots of leads. And I was super psyched because the game company that I worked for, it was like we hired lots of RISD talent, lots of RISD interns. So getting all of those connections was amazing, helped me do my job. That's why I did the event. But when I would get like 50 messages or 30 or maybe even not that many, maybe somebody's only getting 10 messages from students, but they just came off of this event that they spent 4 hours doing. Now they're back to their day job, catching up on other work that they have. So, these are busy folks that are fitting in their recruiting work along with all the other stuff that they're doing. So we will not hear from everybody right away. And I would just recommend to all of you to take a more long-term approach to this communication that you're doing. It's cool to send a thank you note the first week after Internship Connect. Don't get me wrong. It's a great idea. But don't be discouraged if you don't hear back. Think about like, okay, what am I going to do next month to try to keep in touch with them? Because if they're getting like 100 messages right after Internship Connect, what do you think they're getting a month out from Internship Connect? Probably not nearly as many. You could be like the last 10% of folks that's actually reaching out to them, being persistent, showing that you care about this company. That's a good time to be reaching out again. And for our employers, it's awesome because they invested in this event and look at this engagement that they're getting even after the event. So you're not bugging employers when you reach out. This is a very professional activity that we're going to be going through. Another frequently asked question is some of you may have gotten into a meeting or you might hear back from an employer that's like, hey, sorry, we're not hiring, if they are being asked that specific question, right? So as we saw, a lot of these companies are hiring, okay? But not all of them are. And why do they participate? I had participated in this event when I wasn't recruiting because we were waiting for a certain project to be greenlit. You never know what's going on behind the scenes at these companies. But generating leads with all of you, having this association with RISD, this school that turns out amazing talent, that's why these companies come year after year, and it's why they participate. So even if they don't have a role in mind for you now, they'll be glad to have contacts for their future roles, right? They may see you this year, or they may hear from you this year, and then they might hear from you again the following year. I had many students that were like my frequent flyers when I was an employer that I really got to know, and I saw them grow and evolve during their time at RISD. It gave me so much knowledge about them so that when a role opened up, if they were a candidate applying, they were at the top of the list. So it is worth spending the time to make these relationships with these folks. If you are interested in 100 companies, I'm not suggesting you do this for 100 companies. I'm suggesting you do this for a manageable amount of companies. Maybe you have 3 favorite companies that participated in Internship Connect, and maybe there's another 3 out in the world that you just are aware of. Keep your list like manageable. Keep your list down to like maybe a top 10 list, or maybe even a top 8 list, like something that you can manage, okay? And so let's follow up. And I saw this quote and it's interesting. It's like, storytelling is a really important part of keeping in touch with people. And why is that? Well, we tell stories because they're specific and they're way more interesting to listen to. So if you're reaching out to an employer and you're saying, I'm an XYZ designer and I'm looking for a role, do you have one? That has a very limited, you're like cracking the door open for a response, which is probably going to be like yes or no, right? But instead, if you're sharing, and let's talk about some of the things that we can talk about. Here's a simple outline of the things that you can use to approach your outreach to a company. Topic 1, give praise and be really specific. And let me break that down for you. So it would be one thing to say, Hasbro, you're the greatest company in the world, and I love you guys, and you're the best. That is not specific. It's really great, but it's not specific. If, on the other hand, you say something about their line of Transformer action figures and how, as an industrial designer, you are inspired by how articulated their models are, and or whatever that may be. Maybe it's like the way that Hasbro reimagines franchises like Disney franchises and brings them to life through toys. Whatever it is, when you start to explain the specifics of why you're giving them praise, what ends up happening for Hasbro is they learn a lot about you and your sensibilities and your skills. When you're talking like a designer or a creative and you're sharing your knowledgeable insights about their work, you are also like giving them this little mini interview, right? They're learning that like your stuff, and that this is not just passing praise. It's like you really mean what you're saying, okay? The second really important topic is to share stories about your work. And what I mean by that is that you are constantly working on things that are inspiring to employers. It may be a project that you have for class, some problem that you're working through. It might even be a personal project that you have. And when you share stories about that work, and stories don't have to be like everything went great and I'm the best artist. Stories, the most interesting ones, have some tension built in there. Like maybe it's that this was your first time really using this software application to figure out how to create something for the first time, and all the failed attempts that you had, but you stuck with it and you figured it out. Or maybe it's that you created something that you were really psyched about, but then you presented it in critique and you got a lot of feedback that kind of ripped it apart. But in the end, you took some of that feedback and you ended up with something that you were happier with. So these stories of like the challenges that you faced and how you solved it are gold for employers. You know, they don't want to hear about like how everything went exactly right. A lot of these folks are more motivated to hear how you stuck with it and solved problems. And the last thing that's really important in your outreach is to just make sure that you're reminding them or declaring what your goals are. Your goal would be to work at a leading studio like Hasbro this summer. You're really excited to find an internship on their toy department or something of that nature. So by being clear about your goals, each time you reach out to them, it makes it very easy for the employer to understand what you're looking for. These folks, they're problem solvers. They may even know of a job at another studio that is a competitor of theirs, but they heard about it because of the industry that they're in, and they want to see you achieve your vision for the goals that you've set in front of you. I did that several times as an employer. I may not have had a project greenlit, but I knew that there were other studios that were looking, and I would share those leads with those students or those folks. This outline, it's great for outreach, and outreach doesn't mean like the first time you write to somebody. Outreach means like every time you write to someone. Every time you write to someone, there's probably something cool that they've released that you can talk about that as an offering of from their service or from their product line. There's always cool stuff that you're doing in studio or that you're working out that you could share stories about. I probably forgot one major thing with that number 2 item. Share some images. You're reaching out to folks that are creatives or designers or recruiters. If you include a couple of images, even if it's like work in progress, super interesting to see. And you're providing them with like this compelling story every time they open up an email from you. And your goals may stay the same, or they may start to evolve. Always remind the employer what it is that you're looking for and trying to accomplish.